Not many of us, save Miss Cleo of course, who only some of us geriatric folks would remember, are clairvoyant enough to be able to see into the future. Certainly, many games analysts' jobs would be a damn sight easier if they had such miraculous ability. If only, of course, because the late-night phone-in show money would be so much more profitable. I know I barely had the foresight to check the date on the carton before pouring the milk into a cup of coffee, so I can appreciate that something as complex as reading the fickle beast that is the gaming market, well, it could be a challenge. That being said, much like knowing that if it's February in Halifax, I should wear a jacket lest I want to freeze to death, there are probably some pretty straightforward calls to be made when forecasting the response to a studio's decisions regarding their game. Enter Capcom, who has admittedly been hitting a lot of home runs for the last few years, having released Resident Evil 2 Remake, Monster Hunter Rise, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and Street Fighter 6 since 2019, just to name a few. In fact, for a second time, Capcom took first place in Metacritic's game publisher ranking, this time for 2023, placing them above even the likes of Nintendo. Now Capcom has released the much-awaited Dragon's Dogma 2, a sequel to what would likely be called a cult classic, released way back in May of 2012. By all accounts, it was hoped that with the popularity of the Dark Souls games and their derivatives, Dragon's Dogma 2 would be able to break out of the obscure and into the limelight. Something that it most certainly seems to have accomplished, sporting an all-time peak of nearly 230,000 players in the opening days, making it Capcom's biggest single-player launch ever. This all sounds really positive, so you'd think that the sentiment around the game would be equally so, but that's not entirely the case. Dragon's Dogma 2 may be a great game, especially given its unique aspects, but it's saddled with some all-too-familiar Capcom tropes. Gutted by horrific performance regardless of what platform you're playing it on or how powerful the supercomputer you definitely should have bought instead of food is, the first sin committed is the state of the game at launch. This performance is further worsened by everyone's favorite anti-piracy software, Denuvo. Suffering from success also means players not exposed to the original Dragon's Dogma are finding out how obscure it can be now having purchased the sequel, like a single save file, for example. These things alone are usually enough to get some strongly written letters plastered online by players in 280 characters or less, but there's a fourth horseman of the bad will apocalypse: microtransactions. Microtransactions are a hell of a thing. On one hand, developers have watched the mobile market normalize them as a primary form of monetization in a segment much larger than that of the perhaps now archaically considered primary gaming market that includes home consoles and PCs. On the other hand, that same would-be primary gaming market, having not been so directly exposed to this monetization scheme, has broadly resisted the trend, with only certain genres getting the pass, such as sports titles like NBA 2K and multiplayer games like Fortnite. Developers have then been tasked with trying to figure out two things. Will people care that their game has microtransactions, and if they do and it's unpopular, will those still buying them offset those screaming into the void of the internet? Generally speaking, it would appear that most gamers are okay with microtransactions as long as they don't break a few unwritten rules. First, if it's a multiplayer game, then they can't tilt the scales in favor of those who are willing or able to burn the cash to get ahead. Second, don't just shoehorn microtransactions into the game to the point some mechanics exist solely to support them, unless there is a reasonable method in which non-paying members can obtain these items in-game. Finally, don't blast a single-player-only game with a bunch of them. Ever. That last one, unfortunately, Capcom chose to ignore, and I don't think it would have taken a Miss Cleo to see what would happen next. For whatever reason, Capcom decided that Dragon's Dogma 2 desperately needed to have a list of some 21 items available to purchase as microtransactions for their single-player-only game. Everything from camping gear to the in-game currency Rift Crystals are up for purchase, and while it's true that you can obtain all of these items just by playing the game, that hasn't stopped people from getting pretty opinionated about it online, dogmatic even, if you will. What's the big deal, you might ask? If you can obtain all these items by simply playing the game, then While it's a single-player experience, it's not the worst thing in the world, surely. Well, I would tend to agree that it is definitely not the cataclysmic event that some are framing it to be, but the backlash does mean that there's likely some sort of lesson to be learned. I think it's fair to say that no matter how successful a game may be, no developer wants to be the main character on social media for a few days unless it's because Keanu Reeves gave you his seal of approval during some obscure interview.
Then check this out.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Oh, hey, it's you. You're looking great today. How you doing? That's the best I've got on this intro for this stupid ad segment. Look, it's it's not even an ad, really. I'm just gonna tell you that if you're liking the video, hit the like button, comment below, let me know what you think about this whole Capcom thing, the Dragon's Dogma 2 deal. Let me know what you think. And if you want to financially support this kind of content, you can head on over to patreon.com/CritiqalHit, spelled with a Q just like it is here on the channel. And if you like to read or do other weird old people stuff, you can head on over to CritiqalHit.com as well, where all of this content is always going to be posted first. So that if you want to engage with it early on, you can do so, and those who are patrons will also be able to largely comment on those articles as well with the rest of the community. That's all I got for you guys. Back to the video. I think that in this instance, the primary takeaway is that, especially if you're going to brave breaking one of the unwritten rules in some way, communication with potential players is a must. Dragon's Dogma 2 microtransactions have been called beginner bait and are likened to Destiny 2's infamous starter pack, the catastrophic failure that was squarely targeting new players with useless items promising to supercharge their start. The comparison is being made because, given all of these items are easily available in-game, these microtransactions are quite obviously targeting those without prior knowledge of this. The number of people that would buy these items knowing they're in-game would be incredibly few, and one has to wonder, even in the best-case scenario, how much of these sales would move the needle on a game already poised to be one of Capcom's top-selling games ever. What else can be learned from all this? Well, I think that Dragon's Dogma 2 highlights a particularly important point when it comes to microtransactions. If your game is really good, isn't a broken mess, and provides paying players with the best experience, odds are you're going to have a lot more wiggle room to squeeze in some microtransactions, even if they are nonsensical. The problem for Capcom is that while Dragon's Dogma 2 is a good game, it's a janky mess. And because of de novo, those sailing the 7 seas are likely getting the best experience, not the paying players. As such, these completely unnecessary, poorly communicated, and arguably predatory microtransactions that may have been otherwise forgiven have instead become salt in the wound. Will any of this dramatically impact Dragon's Dogma 2 sales? It's too early to tell, but I think it's safe to say that the odds of those microtransactions having sold enough to offset the backlash are not great, and Capcom's goodwill, alongside its game's reputation, took a completely avoidable hit. Much like ruining a perfectly good cup of coffee with expired milk, it might not be the end of them, but their day would have been far better if they had just had the foresight to check the damn expiry date on the carton first.